I would like to call the first case, which is the case of British Petroleum, that's going to be presented by Esperanza Martinez. Thank you very much, Esperanza. Could you tell us, please, who you are and how you know about this case? Greetings to everyone here today. My name is Esperanza Martinez. I'm a biologist. I am an environmental auditor, and I am a member of an ecological organization called Acción Ecológica, and we have many years working, like 20 years working, in helping in issues related to oil exploration to monitor the impacts of these kinds of activities in different areas of the world. Could you tell us, please, what is British Petroleum, and chronologically tell us what's happened in this case? I'm representing the case of the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico that occurred in the 20th of April in 2010. At that time, there was an explosion of the platform, the Deepwater platform, that British Petroleum rented from a Swiss company called Transocean. 2 days after that explosion, the platform sunk, and it began to provoke a huge spill that could only be stopped many months later. Could you explain exactly what BP means and what they do? The BP means British Petroleum. It's an oil company that is presented as one of the companies that has the best technology, and it's a company that is operating in the Gulf of Mexico in areas that are deep water ocean areas and that are in risk of being drilled and oil processed in ways which are very concerning. So the British Petroleum oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico affected the ocean and the atmosphere and marine soils and the coast of the southeast United States, as well as the coast of Mexico and the northern part of the Caribbean island coasts. The oil spill affected more than 100 kilometers of the coast of the ocean of Louisiana, which is the closest state in the United States. And scientists have discovered in the research that this provoked that whole columns of oil down to 1,000 meters below the surface of the swell. So this oil spill provoked 19,000 barrels of petroleum daily. And so we estimate that this was 5 billion gallons altogether that were spilled. So this spill in the Gulf of Mexico put in risk at least 7 species which are already in danger of extinction, and species that already had serious problem, but with this event has created absolutely serious conditions. And the oil, we know not only in Ecuador, but in many parts of the world, provokes a series of defects, and that it kills entire ecosystems, including the massive death to species that have long-term damages, not only upon animal species, but also upon the entire species in the ecosystem. So I request this tribunal to do justice with these species, the 19 species that were affected, of the swallows and the swifts and all of the many species of birds that were directly affected, that are migratory birds that travel between north and south to complete their life cycles, and that they have to pass over the Gulf of Mexico. 1 month after the oil spill, there was the peak of migration of these birds. The smoke from the burning of the oil and the flames caused the asphyxiation and disorientation of these migratory species. It's very easy to understand the sicknesses that occurred to many of these species. Also, the blue tuna of the North Atlantic. This is a species that migrates to the North Atlantic and comes down to the Gulf of Mexico. So between the middle of April and the middle of June is a time when they are in the Gulf of Mexico when this spill occurred, and the oil enters into their gills, and especially the newborn or the eggs that are hatched have caused very severe damage to the respiration, to the lungs, or the respiratory system of the fish. Also, with the marine turtles in the Gulf of Mexico, in this area, lives 5 of the 7 species of the marine turtles that exist in the entire world. The marine turtle was affected seriously in its reproductive cycles. The areas where the marine turtles also reproduce were also covered with oil, and the eggs of the turtles were found months later destroyed. And many of the scientists suspect of many of the damages of the eggs that hatch are going to affect long-term damages, long-term genetic damages. Also, in the tiger sharks, they have their areas of reproduction in Chandaleo, which is close to where the oil spill occurred. These sharks are also in danger of extinction. In the case of the dolphins, this oil spill was really a true massacre for this species, for the aquatic mammals, especially the cetacea, the dolphins, that have very complex systems of communication. So the oil spill affected their communication systems and orientation systems, and obviously affected their forms and access to food. We can also enumerate many other species. For example, the brown pelican, which is this symbolic bird of the state of Texas, and which is affected, their habitat was affected by the oil spill. And this is also one of the species which was declared in danger of extinction just 1 year before the spill. Also, the seahorse, which is a very small species, which is very unique and beautiful, that were very seriously affected. Their entire ecosystem, especially in the areas which are the aquatic pastures of these species. But the oil was also found in smaller species that live below the surface of the soil, that were not able to circulate or to breathe because they were covered by oil. One of the first things that was used for cleaning up the oil spill was to burn these marine grasses. Burning these marine grasses obviously killed all of the species which depend upon that specific ecosystem, and also interrupted the natural cycles and the possibility of photosynthesis which these marine grasses require, and also affect the entire food chain. Also, the mangroves, a lot of studies have shown that the cleaning oil from mangrove forests is practically impossible because it suffocates the roots of the mangrove forest. So this has killed huge areas of mangrove forests on the coast around the ocean in this oil spill. Also, the microbial life has been seriously affected, and these are microbes, the microorganisms that allow the reproduction of the vital cycles of the food chain in the ocean. So this oil spill produced an effect that probably before the oil spill, there was species in danger, but this oil spill is actually accelerated drastically the extinction because of consuming all of the oxygen in these ecosystems, and has spread the damage and the danger to the species. So the reports from a number of different scientists talk about the genetic modifications that are occurring in a number of different species. So we're talking about birth defects in chain reaction that are going to be occurring in the long term that we won't be able to know for many years what the actual effects. One of the effects that has been mentioned, there's a laboratory that talks about the intensity of this oil spill produce alterations in one of the ocean currents, and this change in the current or the route of the ocean current from the Gulf of Mexico is probably going to provoke a chain reaction that is with unpredictable effects that could mean a change in the entire atmosphere. So the damage could have been so serious that it arrives to all of the coasts in the oceans that could eventually affect the entire planet. So with these facts, a lot of organizations have proposed that this has affected the rights of nature. The rights affected are the existence and the maintenance and the regeneration of the vital cycles and the structures, functions, and processes of living beings. Also, the right to have defenders. It's necessary to have the information, and the information was never guaranteed. It was exactly the opposite. British Petroleum blocked the possibility of independent information to reach the public. They distorted information. They negated to inform exactly what was passing with the oil spill and how they were trying to fix it, what was the magnitude and the effects that could be happening in the future. So also the right of restoration of ecosystems is only being talked about later. So still there is no certainty that this is going to happen or the restoration is really occurring. So we can still see evidence of in the different species and ecosystems which have been affected. Obviously it was violated, the precautionary principle, the previous measures were never taken to make sure that the risk was minimized and the operation at that deep level of the ocean would not provoke a disaster of this kind. This is not the first kind that a Deepwater disaster has occurred. There's been other incidents similar to this one in other parts of the world. Finally, it also affected the right of good living of summa causa that allows the conditions of local populations to make a living from natural resources. So we ask that we initiate this process of investigation and to make responsible British Petroleum for having initiated a process of exploration without any kind of guarantee and with absolute negligence. And only as an example, from the environmental impact study of the species that they mentioned which are in danger of extinction, they say that there is no possibility of oil spills in their study, but the species in the Gulf of Mexico, they mentioned the polar bears and walruses included in their environmental impact study. So this was the study which is done referring to as if the species were from the North Pole. We want to make also the government to be responsible because they gave this permission to study here, even though there were all of these risks and weaknesses in the study. A lot of the demands have to do with information, what actually happened, what were the chemicals that were used to disperse the oil spill, that a lot of scientists have said that they could actually be worse than the chemicals in the oil itself. A lot of these chemicals are in experimental phase, and it was known that they could provoke deaths and cancer, at least within laboratory conditions, and it could affect aquatic species. Also, we think it is essential in terms of information that it should be presented what are the scientific institutions and scientists who have signed studies that have tried to excuse British Petroleum. We think it's very important to know what is happening in these scenarios. We think it's essential also to know what is the strategy of lobbying that British Petroleum is using in the United States to be able to receive permissions to operate, to be able to receive their permissions that they continue working even after this case has happened. In the area of restoration, we need to have more information, and we have to have an integrated plan which is complete, obviously independent of those who independent and including help for the populations which have been affected. Also, as a restoration measure to the state, we ask for the suspension of all of the materials and equipment and machines that were left there so that nature can have time to be able to recover. It's very difficult to talk about compensation measures, but we think we need to discuss or to argue the possibility and make this the company to be responsible for cleaning up all of the subsoil which has been damaged, and also the effects on climate change, and that guarantees need to be put into place that this will not be repeated, and that the company can never do this kind of activity again with such high risk. And there's also a plan for abandoning the Gulf of Mexico, and also the rights of the of the ocean should be respected. Another thing we need to remember, we cannot forget what has happened, and that entire life is born in the oceans, and we need to be very clear and wise what this indigenous people said, the Kogi people said. So they talk about the history of humanity in this way. First were the oceans. Everything was dark. There was no sun, there was no moon, there was no people, there were no animals, there were no plants. There's only the mar everywhere. The ocean is the mother. She is the spirit of what is going to come. And she was thinking and memory. I think this tribunal must honor and respect this ocean which gave us life.